Here. Thank you for coming to the Kootenai County Mayor's meeting. It's October 4th, 2023, and the time is 10:01 a.m. I'm calling this meeting to order. In attendance are Commissioners Matari and Duncan. Commissioner Brooks is excused. Are there any changes to the agenda?
No.
Okay, hearing none. I just have one announcement. I guess there's going to be some type of emergency broadcast potentially before we're out of the meeting. So if everybody wanted to either turn off or silence their phones, that would probably be helpful at this point. And we can go ahead and start with introductions. And of course, I'm Commissioner Duncan with Kootenai County and
Bruce Matari, Commissioner, Kootenai County.
Emily Smith, Rathdrum City Attorney.
Leon Deuce, City Administrator for Rathdrum.
Vic Holmes.
Scott Forsell, Mayor of Hayden.
Randy Adams, City Attorney for Coeur d'Alene.
can you make sure that your mic's on when you speak?
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Green light.
Yeah.
There we go.
Christy Wood, Coeur d'Alene City Council.
Fred Dynasson, City of Coeur d'Alene Administrator.
Warren Wilson, Post Falls Deputy City Administrator.
Ron,
Doesn't roll off the tongue yet.
Ron Jacobson, Mayor of Post Falls.
David Callahan, Kootenai County Community Development Director.
Braden, Civil Deputy Prosecuting Attorney for Kootenai County.
All right, thank you all for being here today. Item one is the impact fee discussion, and I will go ahead and let Commissioner Matari start us off.
Yeah. First of all, thank you all for coming out today. I would have to say that this meeting is probably largely my fault, so I appreciate you, being open to continuing this dialogue. All of your feedback was valuable at the last meeting, and so we removed the radios and things like that from the impact fees. We also looked at what would happen if we removed the Parks and Waterways impact fee, and basically it would gut it to the point where we would only be able to collect about, it cut off 80 to 90% when you eliminate the city residents. And so at this point, the board has agreed not to pursue that just yet. But what I would like to do is at least just put this on the table for thought, and maybe we can revisit this later. But the parks impact fee that the county is seeking is not for parks in the traditional manner that I think cities see it, where you're building out a nice place where you have tennis courts and things like that. It's largely used for the boat ramps and for boating in the county and for the infrastructure for that. And so it's not really meant to be something that is where the county can have competing parks like the cities, but it's for the boating community. And so if that's something that you would be open to discussing in the future of how we might be able to collect an impact fee for the boating side of this, we would like to entertain that. But at this point, we've shelved it based upon the feedback from the cities in August. And so does anyone have any comments or thoughts on that, or initially?
Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
I need to move that.
No, I think that was fine.
Does the county not receive fees from licensure, et cetera, of boats at this point? And is this in addition to that? The reason I ask is in Post Falls, we also have a boat ramp that is one of our parks. So again, I just want to make sure that I understand that when boats are licensed, that goes to the county. Is that correct? Or is it the state? I'm not sure. That's why I'm asking the question.
Yeah, that's a good question. Commissioner Duncan, do you have any?
Yes, we do get a portion of the registration if they put Kootenai County as their primary county of residence or registration. So they don't have to live here, but they have to designate Kootenai County. And then I think if they designate it as their secondary, then a smaller portion would come to us. So Parks and the boat launches is funded by that registration, that portion of registration, and the fees that they would have a sticker, a boat launch pass, I guess is how we talk about it. But even those two items don't fully fund the 18 launches that we have in the county.
Yeah, and so the impact fee would be to, for the infrastructure and then any future growth, obviously, as per the impact fee statutes.
But to go back to what Commissioner Duncan said as well, just so I'm straight in my own mind, user fees, so a ton of Washingtonians come over and use the boat ramps. Those user fees do go to the county if they're using the county boat ramp
Yes.
launch. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and our out-of-state permits are more, they cost more than in-state. And the other thing I would say that the county operates more boat launches than any other entity in Kootenai County combined. So,
So I have a question. So you're talking impact fees, but the way I understand it legally, according to the statutes, an impact fee can only offset future growth.
Yes.
So how does this play into, I mean, because we have our present situation, which obviously you have a funding issue. So how are you going to collect an impact fee and justify it in regards to future growth, specifically to boaters?
Well, that's where the consultant, Ann Westcott, who we were working with and who was on the call in August, and we've kind of concluded our services up to this point with that firm. But the idea is either to expand, for example, parking, expand the boat ramps, expand restroom facilities, things like that. So it's for expansion. It's not for operations or just the basic maintenance type components.
Is there any talk with the Association of Idaho Counties to get something in the code where you can charge an extra fee or anything?
There's been discussions with IAC about charging extra fees for something specific like that, generally because, and we were just down there last week, one of the main things when it comes to any kind of legislation is that they want to make sure it affects a large portion of counties. And so Kootenai County, the boating side of things is probably significantly more than most of the other counties as far as revenues and activities.
Have you tried the angle of any impact for the Department of Lands, which, for the lake and remediation along those lines?
The person who heads up Parks and Waterways is probably one of the most effective and efficient department heads we have. Mm-hmm. And so I can't imagine that he hasn't explored and tried to exhaust every option.
Okay, good.
Troy Tymason here. We would like to compliment your Director of Parks and Waterways, including the partnership that exists between the cities and counties. City of Coeur d'Alene just approved an expenditure to redo the mooring docks at 3rd Street, and that was in direct correlation with the plan that your director has for the other access points on all our bodies of water. You've got some pretty amazing facilities thanks to those waterfront improvement grants. If you haven't been to Harrison and checked out what's down there, it's an amazing facility. So I just give kudos to you as well as that director, combined with the partnership with the city of Coeur d'Alene for new mooring docks coming forward.
Yeah, well, thank you, and all the credit goes to him. He is just a hard charger when it comes to that stuff. He's very efficient. So that's kind of where the county is. So of the issues that the city's brought up with impact fees, we accommodated them, and so we would like to be able to work with the cities moving forward. I think one of the issues was having the cities collect the fees before, and we talked about that because we didn't want citizens to show up to the city community development for permitting and then be told they have to go to the county in order to come back. So that's one of the issues that I'm hoping that the cities would be open to, and if that's a yes, then I'm hoping that we can start moving this project along. Is there any feedback on that?
Quick question for you, Commissioner. Are you anticipating an updated study from your consultant? Because it would be helpful for us to see sort of the latest iteration of the study.
Yes, and we can distribute that after this meeting.
Perfect. And then, as we talked about last time, I think the other thing that's standing out for us to address still is the penalties and late charges. That is a big issue for us as we start looking forward to collecting impact fees. We need to have that issue resolved.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand. And, my hope is that at this point, at least we can conceptually agree on what we want to do, and then that would be the final issue because we're dealing with another elected official. And I appreciate that and acknowledge that.
Commissioner, I have a question. Thank you. So we've talked about whether or not the cities would be willing to collect fees for the county. I think just on a quick review, I would have to say we probably would not have an issue collecting impact fees that we would agree on. You've talked about the parks. We have said, and you have removed from, for example, the city of Pulse Falls, the sheriff's department, and the county 911 system as we have our own. I think there's still questions on the jail, and will that information then come to us with this updated impact fee study? And
Yes.
as you recall, the discussion we had previously was some of the items that the county was looking for us to collect as far as impact fees on the jail. We were not comfortable with them qualifying for impact fees. So we would need to have that addressed as well.
And are you referring to the items that were listed for the impact fee to justify the calculations? Like
It
the
was
radios
just-
and things like that?
Yeah,
Yeah, we removed that.
Okay.
We removed
yeah,
those
that's
items.
perfect. That's, looking at the study, I think helps us figure out where
Yeah,
we're
so
at.
we'll get you that information and you can see it, but we basically accommodated, your concerns. Because at this point, we're not moving forward with anything and we just assume, let's address the issues that are on the table so we can at least get something, initiated. And then after that, if there's other issues that need to be addressed, we can look at those.
I had also a quick question. So would that also include an explanation of the methodology for the jail? So I think we were
Yes.
looking for that as well.
Oh, yeah, so you
Okay.
can see the
It has a pretty
calculations.
detailed methodology,
Okay.
discussion methodology.
Okay, perfect. And then draft ordinances and agreements for us to review. Are those coming?
For collecting the fees?
Yeah, when we get to that point, absolutely.
Okay.
We did the same thing with EMS.
Yeah,
if you
yeah.
recall.
That's why I was just
Yeah.
asking if, okay.
Yeah,
To expect
I
that.
think conceptually, we have to agree on what we, what we can do
course.
moving forward, and then we'll work on the details with that.
Okay.
But I think last month's meeting was extremely productive. I very much appreciated hearing the feedback from the cities. And, one of the ones that kind of stood out to me was Mayor Holmes' comment about how the county and the cities used to meet fairly regularly. And so we put in the calendar to try to meet every 6 months so that not only can the cities give us feedback of what the counties can do, but also hopefully the county can give the cities feedback and ask for help in certain areas. So, yes.
Bruce, you and I have talked one-on-one about the issue, thank you. You and I have talked one-on-one about the issue with the jail. And I do consider it a public safety issue that needs to be addressed. I think it will be the details, as we're all kind of wanting to know what those will be. I don't think there's any resistance to addressing a public safety issue.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that, and thank you, because with the growth here, and I have some charts that we can go over that'll kind of address another component of our discussion, which is growth, and hopefully how we can work together in managing that with our services. So that's where we are with the impact fees, and unless anybody else has questions, the next steps are for the studies to be distributed, the updated information. And if you have any feedback, you can send it back in writing and we can address it. And then if it ends up being a lot of feedback, then I'll either meet individually with folks and talk, or we can find another way to kind of meet and hash it out. But my hope is that the feedback that was given in August, it's been addressed. We've removed the issues that the city's brought up, and we can proceed with your okay on the documents. Yes?
Thank you, Bruce. So this is about boaters, and just to give me some information, what is your shortfall? What are you trying to make up here to make yourself whole regarding odors and their impact to your ramps? You said, hey, you have, I don't know, over a dozen.
The original one came out to about 13.2 million in expected, if I understand correctly. 13.2 million was the expected amount. And if we remove the cities from this impact fee, it eliminates 10.8 million.
What do you mean by remove the cities?
Meaning the cities don't collect an impact fee for parks and waterways. Our discussion in August was that the cities did not want to impose a county impact fee on parks to city residents. And so the idea, because they already have an impact fee, a lot of them, for their own parks. And so that would be 2 impact fees. And so the discussion point was to remove the county impact fee on city residents, which would leave that impact fee to just the unincorporated county.
Okay, so I'm going to throw this out here. So we have boat ramps. Post Falls does, Harrison does. I don't know what other cities might on the lake or the river. Have you considered, or would it be possible to have like a joint powers board to oversee this?
You mean like KMPO?
KMPO or the EMS system?
Yeah. If we could probably have a discussion about, an impact fee that would be equitably distributed based upon boat ramps, for example, and we could collect it as one fee and then distribute it equitably among the different agencies, that would make sense, if that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, I don't like creating more government, but it seems like one of the issues here would be representation. And if we're going to be giving money towards something, it'd be nice to have that representation as well. And I think the mechanism for that would be a joint powers board. I don't know, I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah, I would think that it might be easier even just to collect money and figure out a pro rata portion based upon the number of boat ramps in the county, and including all the boat ramps. And then just saying, okay, there's one fee for all the boat ramps, and Coeur d'Alene has 3 boat ramps out of 30, so 10% of that fee would be allocated directly to Coeur d'Alene for that.
And I think that could be done, but my concern here is representation.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if we're putting money into it, then we would like to have just a say.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think the first start towards that say is having these biannual meetings.
Good, and I agree on that too.
And that's my intention of carrying this forward.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, good idea. Anybody else? Okay, well, the next item that I was hoping to kind of just introduce here among everyone is growth. And I think we all can agree that this area has grown like a weed the last few years. And we've seen a lot of changes with respect to sitting in our cars, from getting from point A to point B, standing in line at the checkout, and much more expense just living here. And so one of the things, as I have been getting more immersed into this process of being a county commissioner, is that I see that we don't really have much in the way of good metrics to kind of measure our county services. And so, and I'm kind of jumping around here a little bit, so forgive me, but one of the things that about learning about this form of county government is that the people who created the system, they recognize that if people don't work together in county government, it doesn't work very efficiently. And so it's really incumbent upon the county officials, the elected officials, to work together to solve many of the county problems. And the way that it's set up for the cities, it's kind of like 2 fingers that come off the state government, because we're both kind of regulated by state statute. And the cities have their purview and the county has its purview. And over time, the city's purview grows and the county purview shrinks because there's less county space. But I think what's important is that we find ways where we can work together and serve the community the best, because Coeur d'Alene has its own growth decisions. Post Falls has its own growth decisions. Rathdrum has its own growth decisions, and so does Hayden. But each of those decisions collectively affect all of us, and they affect the county as well. And one of the things that we've been working on is developing metrics for county services. And so we have this handout here. And I can just kind of run through it real quick. And there's two components to it. There's the measurables and then there's the service levels. And the service levels are what we're trying to establish right now. Kind of like the dashboard on your car, right? We have a speed limit that tells us how fast we can go. And then we have a speedometer that's telling us, are we going fast enough or too fast? And so as you go through here, the first chart is just the population, and it's got estimates from the Census Bureau. But the next one is, the second page is patrol deputies per 1,000 of population. And you can see as the population has been growing, our number of patrol deputies has been going down as a ratio. And so we're, at this point, that's our measurement of what's happening. Now, if we have a service level that's established here, where, for example, in 2023, we're down to 0.38 deputies roughly per 1,000 residents in the county. Well, from my understanding, if I remember, the last number I heard, Coeur d'Alene's at 1.76 police officers per 1,000 residents, right? I believe Post Falls is at about 1.5.
I think that's high. And I don't mean to interrupt
Sure.
your thought process. You're looking at total sheriff deputies or officers per 1,000 for the total county.
Of the entire county,
Okay.
yes.
That's a bit misleading then, because if you take out the incorporated areas and then you take a look at those numbers, I think, and we talked about this previously, I think you'll see a significantly different number.
Well, and I agree with you completely. And so the question is, what is that standard? You know, what is that number? We can calculate it without the city population, or we can calculate it for the entire population. Either way, there's still going to be a metric, and whether it's 0.3 for the entire county or 1.25 for just the unincorporated place, either one is a service level, in essence, because typically the ratios are going to hold fairly well. But I agree with you that that's another way to look
I
at it.
just want to make sure we're talking apples to apples.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
Everything else on
but
that?
you can see here it's dropped over time. And so the question is, you know, what is the correct service level for the sheriff's office and number of patrol deputies? And this is just how the county is going to be looking at it, just like each of you cities are going to look at, you know, how many police officers do we have per 1,000 residents. And so once we establish that service level, I'd like to be able to have this kind of information available publicly and hope that the cities would consider information like this in their growth decisions. Now, for patrol deputies, it's less effective, meaning affective of city operations versus the jail. So the next page, you have inmates versus the population. And that gives you a little bit more of an understanding. So right now, I think our jail, the functional population limit is around 360. So we're exceeding our functional limits right now. And so I think it would be helpful in growth decisions if the cities would consider looking at this, and vice versa. I'd like to be able to have metrics from the cities, if there were, that we could use in growth decisions and look at that kind of stuff. Does anyone have any questions up to this point? Yeah.
When we consider any kind of annexation project, we have every department do a staff report to us. We do consider the impact to
Yeah.
police and fire and streets.
Yeah.
If you're
and-
asking us to consider impact to the jail, that's a little difficult to do since a lot of our visitors here are summer tourists, maybe from Washington. I don't know you're ever gonna be able to nail down that number.
Well, you know, and you make a good point. You know, the thing about it is that there is no perfect measurable. But what I've seen with a lot of the responses to growth, at least on the county projects, is that they tend to be more abstract and less measured, you know, metric driven, if you will. That the highway district says, yep, this looks fine, no problem. But they don't really include, you know, what their car counts are and how this might affect it and where that fits into the bigger picture of things. And so it's an attempt, in essence, to at least put information out there so people can look at it. But I understand you're right that they do send requests out to people. But I don't believe that it's been used as much as a metric as opposed to, this should be fine for our operations. We see no issues with it. Maybe you see something different, because I don't see what you see. Can you elaborate a little bit, like the kind of responses you get, and are they?
From our department heads?
Yeah, or anyone outside the door. Did you communicate with the county, or did I mishear you? You just communicate with city department
Just,
heads?
we don't, as far as I know, I have never seen a report from the county come before us on a annexation issue, have you?
No, and I don't think we just do what's in the code.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a city issue, so.
yeah. But I'm not,
I think it's easier when you have your own departments. But of course, you know, the bigger the city, the more in-house that's gonna be. The smaller cities are likely to have to, you know, go out to various districts like the county does. So I think what Bruce is getting at is just, I think at least on our end, we're trying to kind of drill down on those numbers and the true impact of that development on the various systems. And you know, certainly with the, you know, if it's within an ACI protected city or cities, you can comment on that too. But, you know, I think it's a little more of a challenge for us than maybe for at least the larger cities.
Well, it's like pulling teeth for us just to get information out of the school district.
We have that. We have the same problem. Yeah.
yeah. And so this is really just a mechanism where the county can provide information that my only request is that the city look at it and maybe consider it in their decision-making for growth. But it's really just something for people to see. So if they see our jail population, or they see our solid waste, for example, you know, there's all these different county services that by statute we provide to the entire county, and every growth decision will affect that service level. And so we just want to have a mechanism where the cities can look at that and see where the county is on their service levels. And yes.
Thank you, Bruce. I like the data. What would be more helpful also would be to separate out, and I don't know if you can do this, seasonal, because we know that in the summer, we think our city population is probably about 80,000, and we have no data to back that up. It's just, we have a bigger population in the summer, and I know the county will too, and all the cities do, than we do in the winter, the year-round population. And unfortunately, the only data we can use when we apply for grants and other stuff is our city population. We have no tools available to deal with that extra, except we could get, you know, the resort cities tax, that option tax, which would also help you guys, because we could use that for law enforcement and first responders, and that would offset a lot of the cost that the seasonal crime, you know, puts on us and puts on you guys. I'd also be interested in the inmate population. What is the percentage of felonies versus misdemeanors in there? And I think that would also show a seasonal reflection, because there's probably a lot more drunks in there over the weekend on the summer months than there would be the rest of the year.
Yeah, you know, you bring up a good point, and this is really just for illustrative purposes for this meeting. But I think that the more granular the information can be, the better it'll serve people. So this is just something for you to see and say, you know, okay, this is where we're trying to go with it. But I agree. So we have the next page is inmates per jail deputy. And, you know, again, this is for the county, but it gives us a sense as to, you know, what that ratio is. And of course, it's tied to population as a total, because jail population and total population are kind of interrelated to a degree. And then the last page is
Before you move on, Bruce, if I
yeah.
could, does the FBI or any agency have a recommended ratio for inmates per jail deputy?
You know, that's a good question, and that's what we're trying to determine is where these service levels are. For example, with sheriffs and number of deputies per 1,000, we've tried to find a standard, and we can't seem to find one anywhere. And
Not with the Idaho Sheriff's Association?
No. And again, it's because you have some counties that are a lot more rural than other counties, and you know the cities do play a role. The jail is much more impacted overall than the patrol side of things. It's a better driver and metric to measure. So, and then the final one.
Wait, one more question. So is this inmates per jail deputy staffed or funded?
I'm sorry, ask
Do
the
you have
question again.
vacancies in the jail, and are they counted in this, or is this just, so we have 200 jail deputy positions, and this is the ratio to that, or is it to the ratio of how many are currently filled?
This should be the,
So it's 70, detention deputies is 70, that's the data.
it's the deputies on duty, so it's filled positions, not.
Okay, all right,
total positions.
thank you.
Yeah. So, then the last page was just something, and, you know, I don't think it has as much impact on all the cities, but just some data on how far down the wells are being drilled to get water on the aquifer, on the prairie aquifer. And so the intention here is to put together more metrics, more granular information that highlights the services that are being provided by the county, and then where we decide a good service level is for the county residents. And once it's there, I hope that it's something that the cities would at least look at on some of their major growth decisions, at least to help manage to some of these things. But it's just, this is just an introductory discussion. This is not anything other than that. And the cities are free to take it as they see fit. But it might be something that's good for the cities to do too. In that sense.
So we are working on metrics. We typically push this stuff further upstream. We all have master plans for every service we provide, be it water, wastewater collection, streets, parks. We have a master plan, and that's where we bake in what's this look like when it reaches its critical build out, and what are the metrics we have to hit along the way. And so we're looking at those kind of things constantly.
Yeah. Do you put that on a website somewhere?
Yes, all of it's available on our websites.
And how frequently is it updated?
It depends on the master plan,
Yeah.
but we work through them routinely. We
Okay.
try to keep them up to date.
So these are goals, but not necessarily where the city's at.
So there's probably not a dashboard per se that you would go find that information, but you would find the plans and so you referenced the granular look at, say, a intersection during a growth decision. Those are really handled earlier in our traffic studies, that we do those during our master planning efforts. And so when the application comes in, we look at what does this thing need to look like at build out, and that's what we do. That's where we go. So those studies are done earlier in our processes.
Okay.
Yeah, we just had, for example, we just had a preliminary plat that was approved by the council, and our transportation master plan that we adopted in September of last year factored in the full build-out of that whole subdivision and how that would affect the roads before it even came as a preliminary plat to our city council. So when we take a look at all of the land within our city that hasn't been developed, we calculate that as what would it be like at full build-out, and what would that effect be on our roads, our intersections, and on our different factors. So we have our transportation master plan and all the other plans that we have. Again, all of our plans are on our website, and we do it at full build-out, so.
Yeah. So you basically start from the end and work backwards, in essence, assuming a fully built-out city, and then you work backwards to where you are today, and then see how each of that.
What we need to improve along the course of some of those developments. If that's going to require improvements at intersections or improvements in road widths. I mean, for example, when we annex and approved subdivisions for the Brookshire subdivision, it required road widenings on the developers, it required new lift stations, it required all of those different factors so that the growth paid for itself rather than on the taxpayers within the city.
Sure. Well, it sounds pretty prudent from that perspective.
Your comment was correct. We do start sort of looking out at the horizon, because we have an obligation to be able to service whatever that ultimate horizon looks like. And so we want to make sure that we're building the facilities at a large enough scale that we can serve that ultimate population. So, yeah, we do kind of look as far out as we
Yeah.
can and work back from that.
Nick, Post Falls is in the process of updating its plan. And you
Yeah.
guys are working with ITD to, there's actually have an open house tomorrow night, plug
Yeah, tomorrow night at
for that.
4 to 7.
Yeah,
Jack,
and
if
that's
anybody's
how,
listening.
and that's how solid waste, for example, could really, benefit from understanding the growth from all the different cities. Because it's highly leveraged as far as the operation, it's very big. And so the planning has to be many years in advance. So that's another area that I'm hoping we can get some good solid numbers on. And then hopefully they can get good feedback from the cities as to what's coming down the pipeline so that they can manage to that as well.
And we're looking at trying to get and use that data to update our own comprehensive plan too, so.
Does anyone have any questions up to this point?
Just one comment, if you don't mind. I was thinking it might be good if we're starting to build in this relationship between the counties and the cities as we update new plans. We can send them into the county rather than just posting them on our website. The data that comes from those plans might be beneficial in county operations.
Would that help?
Yes,
David?
yes, it would,
Yeah,
for sure.
that would be great. That would be great. Any other questions?
I have one question.
Yes.
Your last page is potentially scary graph to me. Do we have any idea of what the depth of the aquifer is? I see how much it's dropped from the top, but I would be less concerned if the aquifer depth were 2,000 feet as opposed to 500 feet. Do we have any data at all on how deep the aquifer is?
I know there's got to be data out there. I don't have it right now, but
Our Aquifer Protection District Committee is actually, overseeing a study of, to do we're talking about master plans, an aquifer protection master plan too, so hopefully we'll have some of that data coming out as part of that.
Okay.
I was curious on this graph because it kind of didn't match with what I had looked at for our city, because we're constantly watching this. And so as I've looked at this graph, and I even pulled up this well, this is a period between 2018 and 23, basically. Historically, we've seen rise and falls as over the last 50 years. And each one is probably based off of what weather trends we have at the time. Was high snowfalls, aquifer goes up. But as a kind of a straight line across, if you look over a 50-year period, this 410 is about where it falls on a normal basis. So you'll have peaks and you'll have lows, and it goes like this all the way through.
This graph, the way it's listed, is kind of misleading. It's not necessarily linked to just population growth as far as what the aquifer level is at. It's linked a lot to weather as well. And so if you looked at the whole graph over 50 years, there's higher highs, there's lower lows, even as the population is going up. It's
And
not
we've been,
necessarily
we've been in kind of a drought condition for the last few years too, so that might
yeah.
explain
Yeah.
part of it, but then that's still gonna impact development too.
It will, and I mean, because at the high point or low point, if you will, in 1997, it was at 390. And then in some of the really low spots is down in about 1995-ish, 94-ish, it was down to like 420. So it really, we've watched this
Yeah.
because it's been a very big concern within the city of Rathdrum, because the amount of water that's in the aquifer. This is something we're constantly watching. Matter of fact, we use a test well at the Lakeland High School and keep a really close eye on what that's been playing and doing. So it's one of the things that we factor in all of our reviews and everything else as we go along as well.
Yeah, and our Aquifer Protection District actually helped fund that, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's another kind of synergy that we have between the cities.
Right, and the water is a huge asset to everybody that lives here, and we try to make sure that we're not doing anything to degradate it, we try to watch that very carefully. And we see numbers in the summertime that are astronomical as far as water use. But the good news is like 2 million in the wintertime is what we use for domestic. And then we're using 8 million in the summertime, but it's mostly irrigation between that 2 and 8, which then percolates back down into the aquifer for the most part, which is a good way of replacing that aquifer over time. So we're constantly watching that stuff.
Well, it's definitely a very important part of the community, so the more we can work together on that, I think it really helps, especially for the future planning, because no one wants to be in a situation where we discover we have water problems after the fact. So,
Yeah.
There was a major quantitative study done, I think 12 years ago in that neighborhood. I know that, he's the former mayor, Clay Larkin and myself were on that. And there's still booklets out. I know I own one. So I can dig one of them up and send it to you. But they did quite a study on the discharge and the recharge of the aquifer all the way through the Spokane Valley.
yeah. Well, we're fortunate we're up here and not down south.
Yeah.
Another quick comment is the impact of growth on the aquifer level is a bit tricky to measure, because as these properties go from agricultural uses to residential uses, for instance, we have to convert those water rights that were ag rights to a domestic right, and there's a calculation that's done based on how much of that is a consumptive use, how much of it's put back into the land. And so the use for the IDWR is already looking at that and making sure that the level of consumption that's happening to that water is no more than what it was when it was an ag use. And so it's already kind of built in to try to control for that, the increased impact. If there is increased impact on the water, we have a lesser right because they're converting that from an ag right to a domestic right, which limits the amount of diversion that we can do.
Yeah, yeah. One of the other things that back east where I came from, you may have heard of the infamous rain tax in Maryland. And what happened was they started having a lot of problems as growth continued to expand into suburbia and farmland. A lot more asphalt was laid out. And so the water could no longer be absorbed into the ground. And you had a lot of flooding going on as a result of that. And so that's probably one of the things that maybe hasn't been studied well enough, I don't know, on the prairie above the aquifer as growth occurs, that there'll be more runoff and less absorption back into the ground.
So, not necessarily here, because the only way we have approved to do stormwater management is grassed infiltration areas, where all of that runoff is directed right into a grassed swale that then percolates back into the aquifer. So there is in both Post Falls and Coeur d'Alene, there is an older hard pipe system, but those are pretty constrained. And frankly, we often as we can, we take and retire portions of those systems because they're difficult and expensive to maintain. And we do direct most of the runoff into GIAs, which is frankly best practice around the country, to try to make sure that you're preserving as much runoff as you can and getting it back into the ground.
Yeah.
Yeah, and engineer them to take as much crap out of it so we keep our aquifer clean too.
Yep.
Well, and to Pat's point, so it's not just a quantity effort, but the APD is strictly statutory, guided towards quality. And with this growth, as ag land moves to houses, then the chlorides for the streets and the nitrates for the grass treatment, those are, we see rising levels in the aquifer commensurate with growth. And so that's another factor that, okay, you might not be using the quantity, but now the chemicals that are used to treat growth is being evident in our aquifer.
Any other questions about that? The last item I had to discuss And I would like to start with Mayor Holmes, because it really is a continuation of your statement, which is, we're all ears, what can the county do for the cities?
Well, I think this is a good start. We need to sit and talk about common interests and common goals. I'm a big believer that if we don't all paddle the same direction, we don't get anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So I do appreciate this biannual meeting. As far as county goes, I don't know that we have any real needs right now. Our police force is, I'd like to say we could use more sheriff's help, but we are kind of artificially high on our level of service because we went to 24/7 coverage, which takes more officers than were required to meet our level of service when we first did it. So we're pretty solid there. I can't do anything.
Okay. Mayor?
That's the kind of question that you could ask a week ago and we would have had an answer.
Setting aside the issue of law enforcement protection, sheriff's protection, because we're negotiating that right now. I don't see anything that the county can provide to the city of Hayden at this moment. I would like to compliment the commissioners on listening to the concerns that we had at our last meeting and addressing, as near as I can tell, virtually every one of them. You guys did a great job on that, and it's something that we may not have seen so much in the past, so thank you very much for doing so.
Absolutely.
Yes, thank you for the meeting. I think thank you, Warren, Deputy City Administrator. You have to tell me about that going forward. The solid waste program you have is amazing. The work that goes on down south is amazing. You harvest gas off of that product. We do a little thing called Leaf Fest. We actually work with your airport and incorporate 2,000 tons of leaves back into soil up and around the airport. Your new director has been great to work with. I see that as a potential partnership. City of Coeur d'Alene spends approximately $24,000 a month in the recycling program that pulls waste out of the stream. We get little to no credit from the county for that expense. We would like to partner in that direction for the good of our county. So that one comes to mind as an opportunity to do more since we're all in that business. You get contracts for hauling. It looks like Sunshine has stepped into the area a little bit more than we had seen before. Our contract goes long because it's a very capital intensive program to pick up waste and to pick up our recyclables. Unfortunately, that's a commodity business, so the price goes up and then the price goes away, shall I say, and it's very expensive to do that. So I see that as a room that we could possibly do more in.
And that would just be working more with our solid waste department.
Yes, and then seeking the commissioner's inputs to say, how do we better partner on recycling than what we have been doing and get the best dollar value we can for all of our constituents. Our young people are probably better at recycling than others. It feels good to recycling. We need to educate our constituents on all fronts to do a better job of knowing what a recyclable is. So it's a long-term program, but we've been doing it for quite a while now, and it's gigantically expensive.
And I would just say that we have a really good relationship with the county with MOUs in place for law enforcement and fire.
Mm-hmm.
And so if there are other areas that we can span that, I think our role as elected officials is to share resources when we can and to not double tax the citizens. And so if there are areas that we can share expense and it makes sense, I think that's something we should be looking at.
Well, I agree. And, one of the things that I hope that we can talk more about in the future is just with our 911, because we are really behind the 8 ball there now with staffing. And that affects most of the county.
Is that a question for the attorneys? Is that a legislative fee that's set by the legislators, what we can collect for 911?
Yes.
Yeah. And
And
IAC's,
that legislation's specifies very strictly what it can be used for. What
So
it cannot.
then we need a united front to speak to our delegation on that issue.
IAC's bringing forward, at least it was presented, to raise the fee from $1 to $2.
Yeah, because that's a real choke point in the overall service levels for citizens. So,
I would agree with the other mayors. I appreciate what you folks have done. We've always had a great working relationship with the county, and I think over the past year, 2 years, it's been strained, to say the least, and as Warren addressed, penalties and interest, et cetera. But as Mayor Holmes said, if we don't paddle the same direction, we're not going anywhere. And what affects Post Falls affects Coeur d'Alene, Rathdrum, Hayden, the county. So I think we all need to work together and make sure we do all paddle in the same direction. There are issues that, and I'm sure the cities don't do perfect, that may affect the county and vice versa. Our latest was on the annexation estimates that we received from the county at $5 million, and it turns out they missed it by $10 million, so we had to have 2 special hearings to correct the budget. Unfortunately, that happens, and I know that it's another elected official, so I appreciate what you folks face in addressing that. But anything we can do to eliminate those types of situations on either our part or on the city's part or on the county's part, I think can help us move forward, is crucial. We're not going to see a slowdown in the growth. If it slows down, it's not going to be much, but people are going to continue to come here, and we're all in it together. So what can we do to facilitate meeting the needs of the growth?
Yeah.
Warren, you have anything to add?
well, I think most of you have my email address. So, and if you don't have it, I'll make sure you have it. And if there are things that you need, feel free to reach out to me directly. And I'll speak for Commissioner Duncan. I'm sure it's the same here too. So,
Absolutely. And then, so if we wanted to do October and April, do those seem like good biannual meeting dates? So regarding impact fees, once you get the information, if we do have significant feedback, we can schedule another special meeting. Otherwise, we still have the public hearing. So that's another input opportunity.
We would appreciate it if, whatever feedback you get, if you could share it with the other cities. That would be good.
Yes, reply all.
Thank you.
So,
Do you have a tentative date that you'd like to have that public hearing?
we have to wait to see your feedback on this next iteration of the impact fees.
Good answer.
yeah, absolutely.
All right. Anything else?
I think that's pretty much it, isn't it?
All right, I will call for public comment. Jonathan, anybody on the? All right. That clock is fast. 10:54, meeting adjourned. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
And please take lots of snacks. It's